welcome to the WordyGirl Entertainment Podcast. I am your writer-in-chief, Rosalind Jackson. I am a lover of words, and that love led me to a passion for writing. And what's the next best thing to writing? Talking about writing. So kick back and join me for mind-blowing chats about writing, covering everything from screenplays to novels to poetry, from nonfiction books to songwriting, and much more. Phonz Williams started as a set production assistant on Live Free or Die Hard, starring Bruce Willis, and immediately grasps the magnitude of a $200 million blockbuster production. Soon after, he worked in the physical production and marketing departments at New Line Cinema. During his tenure at Creative Artists Agency, the film and television industry experienced a major shift in media consumption, which led him to transition into the television literary department, where he identified new opportunities for traditional television and film writers in digital media. This led him to being promoted to the business development department in the emerging digital division, focusing on servicing an area known as new media. Williams' professional writing journey began as a writer's assistant to Emmy Award-winning executive producer, author, creator Noah Hawley on his first show, The Unusuals, starring Jeremy Renner. After many late New York-LA nights in the editing room, on set, in casting sessions, and in writers' rooms, Phonz learned how to produce a network television series from pre-production through post-production. Williams was one of 8 writers selected for the prestigious ABC Disney TV writing program and became a staff writer on the award-nominated series Detroit 187 on ABC. He also wrote an indie revenge thriller feature screenplay entitled Wolves for Reset Films. He was staffed on BET's Games People Play Season 2, starring Lauren London, produced by Tracy Edmonds for Edmonds Entertainment. Currently, Phonz is adapting a book by Sean Blanchard entitled How About That for a Crack Baby? Keys to Mentorship and Success. Switching from writer to producer, Phonz has also created digital content for superstar athletes and social media influencers, including King Bach, HaHa Davis, Snoop Dogg, and more. He was also the co-creator and executive producer for the HaHa Davis Show for Comedy Central. Most recently, Phonz has entered a drama series development deal with Steph Curry's Unanimous Media. So welcome to the WordyGirl Entertainment Podcast. We have Phonz Williams joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm excited to talk to you. I know we have a lot of people who want to know what it's like to be a screenwriter. Everybody wants to, get that lucky chance to make it in Hollywood as a screenwriter. So I'm sure they'll be excited to hear what you have to say. So where are you from?
I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. So I grew up in Detroit, went to school at the University of Michigan. So it's basically just a Detroit guy up until I moved to Los Angeles in 2006.
Oh, wow. And you came out here specifically to write?
Yeah. That was sort of always the goal. It was LA was the only place you could do it in 2006, 2007. You had to sort of be here to get your feet wet. And it was part of that journey. A lot of people who made that migration during that time from different places probably remembers what it was like to pack up their car and just hit the road with the dream. So I was sort of among that wave.
Okay. Yeah. And so how did you get your start writing?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think the start started probably when I was 9 years old. I would say just being a child who was fortunate enough to have a parent who encouraged them to explore their imagination. So I would say it started at 9, and I think the moment where I realized like the commitment to the discipline happened around 12 years old. I had a typewriter, but we didn't have a computer. And so this is around like 1995, 96. And there was one of my mom's friends who would allow me to use her computer. And one day all my essays and things like that I would use to write on the computer, and I would end up like leaving the document open on the screen. And one day, one of her friends, because she was really a well-known and beloved person in the community, one of her friends ended up reading one of my essays, and it had to do about like Black history or something at the time. But she ended up working for this periodical, and she published it. And I think for a 12-year-old, it was like, oh, like, okay. And so I felt at 12 years old that I was officially a writer, but obviously the journey goes way further than that. And if you fast forward to probably what you're asking about getting into the industry, that process started sort of when I was able to get a writer's assistant opportunity to work for Noah Hawley on his very first show called The Unusuals on ABC in 2008.
Oh, wow. And what was that like?
It was really interesting. I mean, at the time, I mean, Noah's has Emmys and been very successful now. That was his very first show. So I was learning and he was learning, and it was great because I was able to learn from his hip. You know, like I was his assistant, so I drove him places. I grabbed breakfast. I picked him up. You know, like whatever was required. You know, and whatever moments you got a chance to sort of pick someone's mind and have mentors around you, that helps.
Okay. Now, did you do that first, or did you start as a PA first?
Okay.
How did that go?
Yeah. As far as breaking into the industry portion, I started off as a production assistant on Live Free and Die Hard. That was one of the Die Hard movies with Bruce Willis, and I got that opportunity from a friend. Mike Lynch is still one of my really good friends and a filmmaker out here now, who you know how it goes in the beginning. The PA job is just really the basic, most grueling position that you'll take.
Right.
And it really pushes you to determine if you want to do this. You know,
exactly.
It's low pay. It's grueling. It's almost like people go out of their way to kind of disrespect or belittle you. So,
like their job.
Like, did you make an effort to make me feel silly? But so you know, that's just part of the dues paying process. So I did that on that movie and a couple other small independent films, and just hustling, trying to get an opportunity any way you could. And so from there, beyond just the writing portion, because I mean, as a PA, you're not necessarily writing. You're around. You're in the atmosphere, and most importantly, what you should be doing is just learning and networking like crazy.
Right.
So that was sort of just my ambition to understand beyond just the creativity point, which is of course the foundation of being a writer, but the industry portion is a whole nother sort of enigma. Right.
And then did you go from being a PA to the writer's assistant positions?
Okay, so after being a PA, I took a moment and I worked at New Line Cinema. I worked as a floater. So when you're a floater, you're basically just working on various desks during that time and just kind of getting an idea of how the business works. If you remember New Line Cinema's motto during that time, they were independent studio. So they were mini, but they sort of had all the components of a major. So there was sort of a family vibe over there that I wouldn't say that I was fully a part of, because it was still an entry-level job, but I got a chance to learn marketing. I understood production. They were making Rush Hour 3 at the time. They were making Snakes on the Plane, which at the time was a very revolutionary project in terms of marketing and new ways to build a cult audience. So again, I've been writing since forever, and I'm still writing and creating at that time. But more importantly, I'm just trying to understand how the industry works. So still writing. Last job was there. I worked in the marketing department, and after you float for so long, if you don't land on the desk or decide to stay there, essentially you hope to move on. And the next logical step for me in my quest to kind of understand like the business, not just the creative, was to go where it was like happening in terms of like how the business functions. So I decided to go work at CAA. And
Okay.
I got an opportunity to work there. More than anything, it was just kind of like, okay, this is how the business works. And so for a creative, I think it's important that we are able to exercise and use both hemispheres of our brain, like the analytical and the creative portion, and so in the business side. So I spent that time just learning and meeting people, and also just really figuring out as a creative what I wanted, how I wanted to handle my career going forward. And then I got the opportunity to work with Noah Hawley.
Okay. And then where does the Disney writing program come in? Where did you start that?
Absolutely. So after that project, The Unusuals on ABC, as a writer assistant on that project, it was a short-lived mid-season pickup. And they don't network programming has kind of changed a little bit, but you know how it goes with a mid-season pickup. You're basically a show that's coming in to replace a show that they had expectations for, but they primarily might have, if the show underperformed, they would cut it by mid-season. Then your show comes in and hopes to sustain those ratings or be a bigger hit. And we weren't really positioned to be super successful, but we gained an audience, but it just didn't sustain. So my first experience as a writer's assistant and my introduction to, because I was really on Noah's hip, so I got a chance to see, like, man, you can hustle, create a show, put all this time, energy into it, and then the show doesn't get picked up and we're canceled, right? So that felt like my biggest introduction to what it meant to be a professional writer. And even though I hadn't gone on my own journey at that point, I was just starting, but I it was like, oh, this is a business for so. And so after that show failed, I was living in New York at the time. I quit once I left CAA, and I became Noah's assistant. I went to New York really at the drop of a hat, left everything, just went out there. I didn't even have boots and a coat. I was walking around Air Force Ones or Air Maxes in the snow. So, and hoodies. So, it was just like, again, but that's a part of the journey. If you want it bad enough, you got to take the opportunity. Right. And again, I took that risk. I mean, I think that's what is probably the consistent theme of all of our journeys as a creative are just risk involved. And so the show failed or it didn't get picked up. And so I came back to LA really in like a place of like, damn, now what, And so for that first 6 months of just trying to, not necessarily trying to, I knew what it was going to be, but in the process of applying for the Disney Fellowship, anybody who's gone through that process will attest that it's uncertain. So, but you still, in order to put your best material forward, are aware that your chances are like less than like 1%. You know what I'm saying? Like significantly less than 1%.
Wow.
And so at that time, I knew in order to produce the best material I ever written, and I had to lock in. So I just stayed in the house. I watched. I mean, when you're to get in the fellowship, you have to spec a show. And at the time, Mad Men was like one of the best shows on TV. AMC's Mad Men. They were kind of going into like their second or third season.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite shows.
You know what I'm saying? So like, I was so fascinated with that era and that time. And for me as a writer, being informed, having a perspective, and just really being knowledgeable about a period or a world that you're exploring is just like crucial. If you don't have that, eventually it's going to unravel. And so my fascination with Mad Men sort of came from like all those nuances and the specificities of that time that they didn't touch on that I could. So fast forward, wrote a really interesting Mad Men because I had the historical framework to like lean into that space of advertising industry. I was always interested in it anyway, you know, a copywriter and a screenwriter, you know, kind of cousins. So that just allowed me to kind of delve into that world, had a lot of fun with it. It was already a hot show. It wasn't an ABC show, it was a cable show, but you know, I was like, hey man, this is more of my lane.
Yeah.
And you know, they don't tell most of the people they don't tell most of the fellows their scores, but my score was really good.
Oh, good. What did you write about for Mad Men, or can you say?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So and this one was really interesting because I wrote my episode sort of based off of where they left off the finale of that season. So I knew we were going into 1960. And so I thought about what was the most monumental shift in advertising during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And really what it was the Coke and Pepsi, I mean, not Pepsi, soda drinks were starting to figure out ways to market towards women, and diet drinks were changing the world, specifically Tab. And so I just really delved deep into what that meant, you know, what that meant to that period in that time and culture, and sort of how it thematically resonated with what's happening with Don and his wife in that moment. I mean, that was years ago. I can't remember all the specifics. But, you know, that was a fun, you know, you remember Mad Men, that was a fun series. I was fortunate enough that there was a show that I connected to that I could write about, and it made it easier.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, because that was the whole main thing, was the things that they were promoting through the advertising and how they related to what was going on in the world at the time.
Yeah,
that was really amazing how they connected to the two.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So did you then go into being a staff writer on Detroit 187 after that, or?
Yeah. After I got into the fellowship, you know, that you spend a couple months sort of just getting the lay of the land and figuring out what works best for you. You know, and you're also sort of becoming more familiar with the other fellows. They divide the group into drama and comedy. So at the time I was primarily a drama writer. So yeah, I'm from Detroit. So I mean, again, like a lot of things that year was just aligning up for me because I was the only person from the city on the staff. And yeah, you know, and this was my first opportunity with all these people who I didn't really know a lot of those writers at the time. But yeah, went on to the show and just tried to figure it out. You know, you went there to figure it out, and it was an interesting experience, you know.
Did you get that through being in the fellowship, the Disney writing program that they said?
Yeah, it was essentially a part of it. Yeah, I came on that year as a participant in the Disney writing program.
Oh, okay. All right. And then through the program, what were some of the things you guys went through? Is it like, I know some of the programs take you through kind of like a workshop, or you meet a few times a month or something like that. How does the Disney program work?
Well, you have to write another spec while you're there to use as an additional submission piece when it's time to staff, in case the show wants another writing sample. You know how that goes. Sometimes they'll want more than one writing sample.
Right.
So during that time, we're developing an additional spec and meeting different specialists and people who have you know, insider knowledge about how the industry functions, whether that is pitching or presentation or structure, or all those elements that really make you a professional.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Okay. And what would you say
pitching.
um the hmm?
That was in like things like pitching. You know.
Uh-huh. Okay. But what would you say like the application process was like? Because I know a lot of people want to apply for these programs and they don't know what to look for or what to expect.
Yeah.
Um, I know some of them have like very detailed questions questions you have to answer. So what was your experience?
Uh, well, I think one I was fortunate because I worked as a writer's assistant on an ABC show the previous year.
Okay.
That I was, I tell writers all the time, it's, the creativity, you should be able to look yourself in the mirror and know that you have that. But
Mhm.
the other things are just important about just like meeting people. So take advantage of that every opportunity you can. Um, but as far as just the process, I mean, I have been applying to that program since I graduated, and I graduated. I graduated in '05, so it was like a three, uh, 5 year turnaround. So I've been applying for 5 years straight, and but coming out of college, I mean, you're fresh, breath smelling like Similac. No one really knows you. You don't really know what's going on, and
Mhm.
I think over those years, you sharpen your sword, and then you are able to tailor your skills to be ready. And I think all those years I just felt like by the time the opportunity met itself, the opportunity came, I felt ready, prepared, but also the trajectory of a writer's career, or the process of getting in the business then was way more standardized. And what I mean by that, if you didn't like know somebody and they put you on as a writer's assistant, and if you were of color or diverse, or however you want to classify it, and you know how in Hollywood there were only 3 or 4 networks that had programs that focused on diversity and inclusion.
Right.
So and as I mentioned, if 5,000 people are applying for that, the pool
Mhm.
is just like it's like Royal Rumble, you know. So there's but it's also like a unfortunate metric because it's impossible. I mean, you can't tell me that there weren't 8 other people who were just as good as you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
uh, it's really just about being targeted. Targeting and really like keeping the faith, and I guess, and investing in heavily into the preparedness portion.
Right. Right. So what was it like to work on Detroit 187?
It was amazing in the beginning just because I got a chance to go back home and write for a show that I had like a unique knowledge on. And when I was the
Mhm.
only person in the room who was from the city, uh, as a writer, and I think when you see good writing, it's nuanced.
Mhm.
And I felt like I was in a unique position to provide some of those nuances early on as a new writer, or as a baby writer, whatever they call you when you when you first start,
Right.
uh, whatever that is. I felt like I was able to my voice to be heard, and so that was fun, and I got a chance to really go back and feel the energy and the excitement of the city. So
Mhm.
it's good.
Okay. Now tell us about your experience writing for games people play.
Yeah, I mean, this. I guess I think the the time and the growth for me in between those 2 opportunities are very different.
Mhm.
Working on the network show that has network expectations as far as just like the style and the structure and the function of it is very standardized,
Mhm.
and even what even what they're sort of hoping to touch on thematically, et cetera.
Mhm.
And when you go into the cable space, I think there's way more, uh, uh, I won't say freedom, full on freedom, but there's more room to to lean into things that are more like culturally specific,
Mhm.
and the stories that actually mean mean a lot to the world that you're telling the story in versus like it having to have a grand commercial mainstream appeal to it. So for a writer, it's just more intriguing because you can sort of be creative. And my experience on Games People Play, I didn't come onto the show until the second season.
Right.
So the first season I wasn't around or on it. It was unique for me because every time I worked on shows in the past, I always came in on the first season. And everyone knows in television, the first season is the hardest season. You know, like,
right.
Like if you don't get past, there is no pass and go if you don't get past that season. So going into a second season where the episodes are ordered and guaranteed and no one's gonna like lose their job in this season, that was a better security to have when you're developing the world of a story. Network, when you're writing scripts that are live, that they're, what I mean by that is that they're writing them on Monday of week one, and then they're prepping them on week two, and then they're shooting them by week three. And once you get in the cycle of that whole process, there comes a point where you're writing and producing them simultaneously. Okay. And that is tough because the network executives' vibes change from week to week. They could have loved episode 2 on the script phase, but then it didn't do well ratings wise last week, and now they're afraid of all the episodes going forward, and things shift and change around. So right. you're literally creating from a different comfort space. And so my experience on Games People Play, having been able to go in and number one, have the luxury to work with like a Black female showrunner. That was the first opportunity I ever had to work with someone like that. And
shout out to Vanessa Middleton.
Middleton, and who brought me on the show and really was very encouraging and sort of understood my whole story as a writer and respected the things that made me unique. And it was a really pretty good experience. I mean, we had a good room, a good balance, a good small room that was balanced with people who all had really great careers and brought a lot of fresh stuff to the table. And this upcoming season, even though it hasn't, we're still trying to determine where that's going to go and how that's going to happen. But the scripts are done, and right. I think the writers are hoping that's as happy about what we did.
Right. Now, how was your experience in the actual writer's room? Because you guys, due to COVID, were writing virtually. So tell us about that experience, what it was like to be in a writer's room, but you guys are actually at home on your computers, in a Zoom conference with each other or something.
What's interesting? I think if you're a millennial that most writers are kind of hermits anyway. We kind of, we have introverted tendencies, or right. So I'm an only child. I can adjust. I wear shorts every day. I haven't put on real clothes in so long to get up and just wash your face and throw on a shirt, make sure your top is good. I made that part work, but also because we started off the top of the process in the writer's room, and we had broke a significant portion of the season. We were already kind of ahead of the schedule, fortunately. So making the virtual adjustment for some people, they it's different from them those who are just used to the more traditional process. I feel like this is probably going to be something that we're going to experience for a long time. And because I work with creatives who aren't always close to me, is fine. It works for me. I can write. I just need a laptop and a desk.
Right. Now, would you prefer that over going into an actual room?
Well, when COVID's going around, absolutely. But but if there's no pandemic where people's breath could kill me,
Mm.
no, I do think what this process has taught me that the room can be optional. I think a lot of times because you're paying rent and
Mm-hmm.
and I'm paying rent for these tables and all this stuff, we need to be
Mm-hmm.
using them. But if I'm a creator who, as a creator and as someone who has aspirations to running the business side of their business as well, I think that you can save a lot of money and be really efficient if you have good people.
Correct, correct. So what would you say to a new writer who is they're walking into their first time getting ready to be in the writer's room? What tip would you give them of what they can expect?
Well, I think that it's crazy at 37, like having to say this, like with my day, like it's the internet has shifted the world. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I came in on the tail end of like a formatted process of a step by step. You do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. And I don't think that the standardized rules should apply to creatives as much as it used to, because sometimes that kills the very thing that we're good at. So I would say if you're going into a room, it's a very different vibe. Like any job, it's like, it's still a job. So like any corporation, like if the boss who runs the place brings you in, you're probably in a little bit more of a comfortable place than the enemy of the boss who brought you in. You know what I'm saying? So I
Right.
think you want to always be aware of your standing in the dynamic,
Mhm.
because I was always taught as a young person to do your best,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
That sounds good. That makes sense. But that's not how it works always. And so, and because, it just isn't, because you're dealing with egos, and in the beginning, everyone's cushy and fun and joys. We're sharing candy in the sandbox. But after spending 3 months or 5 months or 6 months with people, the dynamics can shift. So I think it's important to be mindful of those things and trust what you're feeling when you go there, and you'll be able to sort of find your way. Every room's different, so
Mhm.
it's tough to say how one person will do it versus how another will. I
Mhm.
think that there are traditionalists, and I think there are new creatives who don't have to always be so ego driven to flex their title as much as they can just say, hey, I happen to be the leader or the captain of the ship, but
Mhm.
we're trying to win. And
Right.
I think that that's a leadership style that varies from room to room.
Mhm. Okay. You're currently adapting a book to screenplay. Is that correct?
I
Or have you
optioned
done it already?
no, I optioned a book by one of my friends by the name of Sean Blanchard. It's called How About That, for Crack Baby. And it's really a part of his memoir, but it also delves into the importance of mentorship,
Mhm. Okay.
and sort of through the eyes of his story, being someone who grew up. His brother was one of the most notorious drug kingpins in the city, and
Wow.
sort of how he was placed himself in a position that could have ruined his life, and how he made a commitment that brought him out of it. And eventually who has a brilliant mind, could have been a Wall Street trader and made millions, but decided that after knowing the importance of having mentors and the impact that can have on the lives of young people, he decided to dedicate himself to that. And
Mhm.
it was just a touching book for me. It was done really well. He published it independently, which I like about this era. I mean, going back to your question earlier about a new writer going
Mhm.
into a new room or the new world, we're in a great time. I mean, the internet's there. Like there's people are actually open to hearing stories that aren't all the same,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool. And so, going back to this book, uh, I thought that there were elements of the book that could be interesting if it were brought to screen. So, it's a process. The adapting of a book is tough, especially when the person Against People Play is based off a book, but
Mm-hmm.
a author's instincts and a screenwriter's instincts aren't always understood on both sides of the table. Do you know what I'm saying? Because the author always wants to can have their own wants for a movie that doesn't necessarily fit
Mm-hmm.
all. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but the process of adapting for me has just been really um, collaborative. I have another producer that I'm working with as well, along with the writer. So it's collaborative. I'm listening and being respectful that I do take everything that they feel into consideration.
Okay. Do you prefer uh, doing an adaptation, or do you prefer just regular screenwriting?
Yeah, I like coming up with my own stories. I mean, that's where I'm happy that my creative spout keeps functioning. Like I come up with stuff all the time, so I like to be able to feed my own babies.
Right. And what is your overall writing process? Like when you get a brand new idea you want to work on, how do you start? Like what do you start with? Some people start with a character, some people start with a storyline. Like what's your process?
Uh, if my process varies from thing to thing. I think in the beginning, you know how it goes, where you're writing what you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to get out the stories that have been like in you forever. But then after you sort of get those out and you're now creating commercial content or commercial product, it varies. One of the things for me, because going back to again the traditional path versus the non-traditional path, I started off doing the traditional route, and like you had to choose if you were a drama writer or a comedy writer or a thriller. Like there was all these labels.
Right.
And I never accepted those labels, but I knew I had enough to fulfill whatever creative output made me a drama writer, but I had other interests in like comedy and like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, thrillers, horror. So like these other genres were interesting to me. So I just started being able to delve into them. And I like comedy, and started really getting into writing comedic scripts. And it took me about 2 years to really get the acceptance from the comic community to be like, okay, yeah, you do this well enough. So
Okay. So you're executive producing on the Haha Davis show on Comedy Central?
yeah, we're going through a development process right now. We haven't locked in a specific network at the moment, but
Oh.
I have been working with Haha. The Comedy Central project that we did is a sketch that's available right now
Mhm.
on YouTube called D-Boy, and we shot that really as a initial concept
Mhm.
for a greater character. And Haha's a kid, going back to what happens after you get off of a show
Mhm.
that ends up getting canceled. Every writer kind of comes to that point where like it's like pushing a rock up a hill, and then you get all the way to the top, and then the rock just like falls back down. Like, oh shit, and it just bursts at the bottom. And so you have to figure like you're gonna go back to the bottom of that hill, or and try to push one back up, or just change your perspective now that you're at a different position on the hill. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I look at someone like Haha, who at the time in 2017, when I first started working with him, he had less than 1 million followers. But
Mhm.
the Instagram, as you can see, and a lot of the new creators are creating their own lane. They're using their imagination. They have these phones that are like television studios in their pocket, and they have this amazing ability to engage with their fans. They have a limited time from as far as a minute wise goes to tell a full story, but
Mhm.
but a minute is far more is more than enough time to introduce a funny concept that can be expanded. And
Right.
I felt like with Haha, part of his genius is he does that in his sleep, and it's like he almost like I won't say he takes it for granted, but it's like, man, like like you just do this in your sleep. And I felt really connected to it, but also he's from the same side of town that I'm from. I grew up in Detroit, so I felt even that much more vested in wanting to, help him transition from the internet to the next space. And it's been interesting seeing his growth. He's featured on a ton of television shows and getting and growing his catching fire right now in terms of his appeal in Hollywood. So, as a writer, collaborating with those types, being able to help people who have something they just don't know how to fully maximize it, from a creative standpoint and a story standpoint. And the Comedy Central process was just one of the things that we worked on, and we have a couple other things that are in development right now that we're beyond excited from, and sort of like amazed by the outpour of interest.
Oh, wow. Okay. And can you talk about your development deal with Steph Curry's company?
Yes, I can. So we, man, the development process for most people who try to understand it know that it could sometimes referred to as development hell. I won't say
Right.
that work developing with them has been hell, but I think the challenge for me throughout my career, and the reason why I probably don't have more mainstream credits,
Mhm.
I have to do with uh, I have a tendency sometimes to really care about controversial topics and care about exploring like controversial subject matters. And this particular story, I can't really go too deeply into it, but it's a very it's a tough sell. And but but if once we get it across, I think it has potential to really be unique and unlike anything that we've seen currently. And that's a boisterous statement. And I wish I had an alternative way to express it, but
Mhm.
we feel really excited about it. But it's been a 2-year process, and
Wow.
as a writer, like you come in with this baby, you're like, oh, look at my baby, she's beautiful, ain't she? Look at that baby. Look at the TV. Look at her smile. Then everyone starts talking about how your baby head isn't proportional, or like, oh yeah, I think your baby knock need, or whatever they think. And now they like dissecting what you thought was a beautiful baby,
Right.
and so
And then you get
that
offended. Like,
yeah, you kind of like, well, that's a mole, like, it's supposed to be there. That's God's perfection, So like,
right.
so it's just a process with a lot of back and forth for as a creative. You especially in my space, because I haven't created a show before. I think if I had a show on air, if I had created a show that I got primary created by credit in the past, the
Mhm.
process would probably be a lot easier. So but I was aware of all that going into it. The cool thing is that when you're in development, a lot of times it isn't just about your story. It's about when you bring out your story. Are we in the right political or social climate to
Right.
talk about something that is unfavorable or controversial? Or are we in a climate where people just want to laugh and they want to have escapism, or they want to be engulfed in fantasy? And the normal development cycle shifts every year. So
Right.
the wave goes, and I think in the beginning, you know, a great story has to be at the foundation of any of this stuff, but the release point and when you pitch it and all, you know, there's all these just things that you have to be mindful of before going out there, and we sort of really have explored every piece of that process. And I feel like I've learned more. I've gotten stronger. I've been able to lean in and trust the value that I bring. I think that, you know, this industry has a tendency, you know, I know that there's a hierarchy and it exists for a reason, but it's not always the reflection of what your skill levels are or what you bring to the table. But we're in a risk-averse business, so people have to make sure that they cross every T and dot every I.
Right. Okay. Tell me, who are some of your favorite writers?
Wow. I mean, obviously I'm biased. I've always liked Noah Hawley, even when like no one knew who he is, and now he has a ton of Emmys, so people are starting to sort of respect his unique style. I've always liked him for just being I won't say not just fearless, but like being comfortable with doing some unique stuff and like saying, hey, that this is it, you know. And then Paul Haggis is one of my really just somebody who I've always been a fan of and have had the pleasure to talk to a few times. And then
He's really active on social media, like
is he?
on Instagram. Like he's even liked a couple of my posts on Instagram. I was like, what?
Yeah, he's a lot cooler than you know, you would expect from like from him. But and I would probably say like Cheo Hodari Coker. He's a one of the top screenwriters, TV writers in the business. He did Luke Cage. But there's a ton. I mean, we're in an amazing time, you know, like there's so many new perspectives and new voices, and even the elder statesmen are doing things that we didn't necessarily know was in their repertoire. And I mean, it's almost impossible for me to name all these people, you know, like you know, Charles Murray, really good writer. Man, and I almost feel bad because when I mention one of these people, I want to see somebody else. My man Randy Huggins. I want to shout out Randy, who is doing the BMF project for Stars. That's the homie. So I want to make sure he's doing, you know, that goes well. But there's a ton of people. There's almost too many to name. I mean, Hollywood. Where, you know, this is a great time. It's an amazing time, and I'm inspired by, you know, damn near everybody.
Okay. What are some of your favorite TV shows?
Watching right now, The Chi. Lena Waithe is they elevating that thing this year, and they're doing a good job. Man, I watch so much TV that I don't want to endorse a show just because I watch it. I can't say that's my favorite just because I watch it, but The Chi is one of those things that I have to watch when it comes out. Power obviously is a really interesting show, and I want to see what all these spinoffs are going to become. Super excited, like Courtney Kemp. You know, she did her thing. Like, you know, she created a really special world. So I like shows that can spin off. But man, I don't know why this should not be stumping me. I just checked out this show called P-Valley.
Oh, I've been hearing about that one.
P-Valley is a really interesting show. I like it. You know, it's a ton of fun. Then Watchmen, The Watchmen was probably one of the more standout shows that I had to watch. I think the few shows that are still event television, like event TV is dying, but there's very few shows that you feel like the moment it drops, you got to check it out. And I think those are probably among those.
Yeah, The Watchmen was amazing. I'm like, I wish they would bring it back. I was listening to a podcast where they were talking to the I think it was the showrunner of the show, and he was saying, you never know, it could be a possibility that it could come back, but he was saying right now, most likely not. And I was like, why? It was so powerful. Like, we need that back. Yeah. So do you have? Oh, go ahead.
I'm really looking forward to just seeing after like the pipeline unclogs, all these new shows that are in development, and people have been really being super creative. I think it's David Makes Man. D. Harris Lawrence is doing over there with that project is super cool. So it's a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, so much to watch. I have so much in my queue that I still have to get caught up with.
Yeah.
So what would you say to aspiring writers?
I mean, there's never been a better time. Like, and I mean that like so sincerely. Like, I graduated college, YouTube became popular the next year. I wish I could have used YouTube. I just the nature. Like, people, and you talked about earlier about favorite writers and peers and things like that. Like, I respect and admire all my peers, but like I'm really thinking about that new age 9-year-old who has a cell phone and who is pushing boundaries and every day, and is like, instead of just searching social media, they're pumping out and creating content and getting better and learning angles and having a respect for the history of cinema, and combining these the abilities of the new age, and that individual is going to be a bad person. Like, girl or guy, they're going to be that one. So I would say you have to. I think it's important to not disrespect the people who came up the more traditional way, and still have respect for the process, and don't and invest in your skills. That's the biggest thing. It's like owning your skills, because with the internet, people get like this immediate gratification. You come up with this really cool idea, you post it, and a million people like it. But you now are faced with the burden to keep doing that, and that's very challenging if you can't create like an actual singular piece of commercially viable product. Distinguishing those two things are kind of important to be mindful about. But if you're coming in the game right now, it's right. Like that's where it starts. Like, you have to write every day, own your skills. I think the downside of this time is that a lot of people are ADD, and it's a struggle. You know what I'm saying? Like, and but really developing that muscle and putting the time in that it takes to keep improving, and actually have the tools in your toolbox, craft wise, to tell a story in any form. The notion of television, the notion of film, the notion of all this stuff that's just form. It doesn't, like, comedy and drama and tragedy and comedy, like those are just polarities, but like story is the one most consistent thing, and it has a beginning and a middle and an end. And if you can tell a story in any form, then I think you're in a sweet spot.
Yeah, that's the key right there. So what is next for Phonz Williams?
A few things. I am in the process of producing an Audible series about Kwame Kilpatrick.
Oh wow!
So I'm looking forward to doing that. I just got we just got the trailer finalized today. I feel pretty good about it. So
oh wow,
see what happens exciting when people hear this interview a year from now. But then Yeah, I'm still working with Steph on our project. We're on like we're on third base right now, so we feel good about that.
Okay.
And then the stuff that I'm doing with Haha, I'm super excited about. We are developing his own show, so a series called Carlos.
Okay.
And there's interest, and I'm excited about that. So I just want to make sure that this project is really that one for him, because we want to make sure it makes a splash and culturally and connects culturally, you know.
Okay. Can you say what that's about, or?
Well, Carlos is really just loosely based on Haha's life as a young man who, like a lot of young people, didn't really necessarily know what they were going to do with their lives. You know, you graduate high school, and if you don't go to college, and if you look up and you're working jobs in a manual arena or a manual industry, and trying to figure that out while the world is starting to shift and pass you by, and his struggle with finding sort of meaning in an ever evolving sort of world. You know, you just think about the notion of over 80% of jobs are supposedly subject to being eliminated due to automation within the next 4 years.
Wow.
I think a lot of, young people who, when you grew up in an industrial town like Detroit or the Midwest, or these blue collar cities where there's coal miners or any of these jobs that require to just do your hands and a strong back that have been constantly shifting. How do you find purpose when your value was tied to a faded ideal?
Correct.
And in that process of finding it, luckily we live in a time where the internet does exist, and you can go from a person making videos in your mom's basement to being on the Old Town Road video, which is a most watched video of all time. And we'll sort of chart that process and sort of what he experiences with his friends in the city, and being a guy who has 2 baby moms, and that whole real slice of life that I think is reflective of what the young Black male experience is in America right now. We use comedy and dramatic aspects to sort of tell that story.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah. Where can people find you online?
Just at Phonzell. That's PHONONZELL.
Oh, okay, on both. You said on Twitter and Instagram.
Instagram, yeah.
Oh, great. So you guys go out and follow him, so you can get some interesting posts on writing and whatever else.
Yeah. Looking forward to whenever we get Games People Play season 2. I'm looking forward to the people I think getting a chance to check out this season. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the next season is going to be explosive.
Yeah.
Lots of surprises, twists and turns.
That is for certain.
So we'll let you guys know when that's coming out. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today and giving my audience all the deets on being a writer. I'm sure everybody will appreciate it. And I thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bye. Thanks for taking the time to tune in to the WordyGirl Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to check out my blog at www.wordygirlent.com. That's WordyGirlent.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter at WordyGirlEnt, and on Facebook at www.facebook.com/WordyGirlEnt. And always remember, it all begins with a single word. So what are you waiting for? Go write.